Welcome everybody to another edition of the Apache Cordova developer meetup. We're sharing this with the world. We want everyone to see what we're doing, and we're just going to talk about what we're working on. We got a couple topics today. I don't know. We can just continue our conversation. We're just talking about the Electron release that Brian is working on. So, if you want to continue?
Sure, I guess I can give an update. So this is going to be like the second major release. It's having a big update with the Electron core dependency. It's going from, if I remember correctly, version 4, all the way up to version 10. It introduces a lot of new features like dark theme. It also fixes a lot of bugs, things with regarding to, like, say, the max signing, introduces like custom schema, stuff like that. And then as for the release, like what we were talking about earlier, there was just like a small bump that I hit while trying to prepare the release, something I discovered with regards to an issue in NPM, but it's not something that would delay the release or cause an issue. It's just for those that were to try to install Electron's package that they cloned from GitHub locally. So if they wanted to use something from GitHub, they could just point directly to the GitHub repo and it would actually successfully work. So that's kind of like what I've been working on. And I guess the other thing is the camera plugin release has passed all votes, but I just need to submit the email that it's successful and then continue with the release. So that's kind of what I've been working on.
Nice. Yeah, you've been on a roll with releases, so it's awesome.
Yeah, trying to push through.
I can give a small update too. Since the last meeting, I guess, we have identified some issues with Paramedic and Travis in regards to the connection to Source Labs. Unfortunately, it's not yet solved. I've reached out to the Travis CI support, but the issue is open since nearly 2 weeks now. I doubt they will fix it because the JWT add-on is deprecated and we need to rely on it because of pull requests that need from pull requests from forks to be more precise. So the workflow works for them too. I've fiddled around with using GitHub Actions locally, installing the corresponding iOS simulators and Android emulators, but haven't finished that yet. It sometimes works, but there are some test failures too that needs to be investigated. And if we ditch Source Labs, we will lose the screenshot and video feature, but I think that's okay because we are only opening the emulator and having the Jasmine overlay too. So now nothing really to see, nothing really interesting. But once that's done, we have finally, hopefully, a green Paramedic build again and can update our CI configs for the plugins too. And it may speed up things because we don't need to wait on Travis for 3 hours. Anyone else?
I don't really have an update for anything that I've been working on Cordova related, but I did want to talk about the platform-centric workflow and sort of just give everyone a bit of history about what it is, because we keep starting discussions about removing it and then not being sure if we can remove it or if anyone's using it. And I think that a lot of people have never actually encountered the platform-centric workflow.
Awesome. Let's jump into that.
So in the very early days of Cordova, pretty much as soon as it was donated to the Apache Software Foundation, there wasn't really tooling per se. Every platform was its own thing that you downloaded. It included all of the core plugins in the platform. And if you wanted to build an app for iOS and Android, you would download the iOS project and you would download the Android project. And if you were really lucky, someone on your team would write some sort of makefile or bash script that would copy your assets around into each project and then build the projects. It worked, but it wasn't super optimized or user-friendly or consistent between platform to platform. One of the early changes that was made after it was rebranded as Cordova was to start adding some consistent tooling to each platform. And these are the bin scripts that are in every platform. So there's a bin create for creating a new project. Once you've created a project, there's a Cordova folder that has some other bin scripts in it for building, testing, emulating, stuff like that. So those were all written in Node.js. The idea was that you would use the plugman tool to install your plugins directly into your platform. With this system, you would still need to download each platform separately. How you would copy your assets into each platform was still a problem for you to solve, but you would have sort of a consistent bin tool that you could use for building it that was the same command from platform to platform. The next logical upgrade from that was to have a Cordova CLI that sort of did all of the managing of the platforms for you and handled platform adding and removing and plugin adding and removing. And that was sort of the first time that there was a how you should structure your Cordova project with the plugins folder and the platforms folder, where config XML would go, stuff like that. So hypothetically, the platform-centric workflow is still supported. Hypothetically, you can download a zip of any of the platforms that are published. You can run the bin create script to create a template of that platform and start developing on it. In practice, there's a few issues there. The first one being that when you download the zip file and unpack it, you need to run npm install yourself before any of the tools will work. Managing the plugins with Plugman, I don't think has ever been properly documented or tested. We know that the platform-centric workflow is not properly documented or tested. And what we're finding is that there's a lot of ideas for how to streamline some of the way that the templates for the projects work. But those are often restricted by the idea of not needing to break the old workflow. Jesse, I think that is roughly accurate in terms of history.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there was, back in the day, there was always the thought that some people would come with an existing app. So we also wanted a way to add a Cordova view to do just a little bit of Cordova. Say all your help content or all your dynamic content is loaded from, you know, through APIs, and you want to populate one view with that while still having, you know, other things that require native or that you haven't switched over yet exist in the rest of your app. So that was part of the reason for keeping it around, but we never really saw adoption of that, and it was never documented well enough that people could actually move with it. I mean, we did, the PhoneGap team did help a few people with their individual apps, but it was never widely used. So I think it would be fine to let all of that go and streamline. Another piece of complexity came in through the whole Cordova JS and having Cordova JS as a central repository that builds a specific Cordova JS for each different platform, and then having to pull all of those together into the various platforms has been tricky as well, especially when you look at releasing platforms independently, because they'll make changes to Cordova JS that aren't yet released in Android, but the Cordova JS in iOS is more recent. There's little gotchas that can occur through that. So the more we can streamline that, the better, I think.
I could say a bit to that, because I've been working exactly on that. Not so recently, but some time ago, I refactored the whole Cordova JS build, and basically it's just like baby steps away from the idea was exporting the build, which is just a JavaScript Node.js build of Cordova JS as a package export, so that platforms could just depend on a certain version of Cordova JS, like using Semver, and so every platform can use the Cordova JS version they want to use, and just use the JavaScript API provided by Cordova JS to build their version of Cordova JS whenever they need it. I mean, the plan was that we do it on prepare or pre-pack, like Brian talked about before, but you could theoretically do it during the project prepare of Cordova or something like that, whenever you want. So that would, like, platform-centric approach or not, that would solve this issue for good. We basically just have to make the new build an export of the Cordova JS package and migrate the platforms to using it. It's not that much work left to do there, actually. But unfortunately, lately I've not had any time to really commit to Cordova. Yeah, it's just as a side note on that particular topic.
I did just want to mention the embedded use case that you mentioned, Jesse, where you're sort of using Cordova as a library for one or two views in an existing application. I almost see that as like a third separate use case. And I think that would still be supported because we have, like, the iOS Cordova lib is published on CocoaPods. And I think we would still keep doing that. And you can pull that into an existing app. Similar for Android, we have it published to Bintray or JFrog or
JFrog. JFrog.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we should still be able to support that, and it should be possible to pull that into an existing app. I know there are a few people who do that. We've had some issues opened related to that, but I definitely agree that how to do that is not documented well currently.
And those, I think those published native libraries for iOS and Android are used by Capacitor to, if they need to use Cordova plugins. And I'm going to add a remark that I think the platform-centered workflow sounds like it. Would that be would that be a benefit over Capacitor, that Cordova could support the platform-centered workflow?
I think it's roughly equivalent to Capacitor in that you're generating the native projects and then you're doing a lot of your work directly there instead of the Cordova CLI workflow that sort of treats the native projects as build artifacts. Given that the platform-centric workflow is poorly documented and semi-broken right now, I don't think that I'd call it a better alternative than Capacitor. I mean, Capacitor is also potentially a reason for us to not work so much on trying to maintain this, because Capacitor does solve that use case.
That's a very good point.
I'm sorry to say, I'm actually not, well, like with Capacitor, you still have to have you have a www folder, iOS folder, Android folder all together, right? I mean, it's okay, but that's what they do.
Yeah, I think the main difference is that you're not treating the native projects as build artifacts. So if you want to add extra native code for custom views, or if you wanted to add SDKs, you can do that directly in the native project. You don't have to worry about the project being deleted every time you build.
Makes sense. Well, I wonder if I think it's like the embedded, no, it's like the native library for Android and iOS. Would that, could that solve the same problem as platform-centered workflow solves?
Potentially. I think if we tried to move people from the platform-centric workflow, and I mean, we don't even know if there's people to move, to using the embedded one, it would sort of be on them to create their project themselves and then add the library.
Because I think, I mean, if someone can document the embedded, like, if someone could document how to embed, at least on iOS and Android, I mean, if it doesn't help people today, it'll help people another day, I'm sure.
Yeah, I definitely think that improving the documentation around the embedded workflow is a good idea.
How would you deal with the plugins? Because I remember PhoneGap, I think, used to also release the plugins on CocoaPod, which we don't do, nor manage or anything. So if you were to like tell people to use this embedded view, like to run pods install Cordova, which would be the step to install it into a native project, how would they then add a plugin from Cordova?
Plugman? Would Plugman do it?
Yeah, Plugman could do that, and that was why Plugman itself had its own CLI.
So does that create the Cordova _ plugins.js file? Because where does that come from? Like
you have that by default, and it
if you
adds
come
to
to
it.
the native project, you don't have.
No, but if you go with the embedded workflow where you add the view, you would have that file, and as long as everything is in the right location, then it would work. Some of this possibly broke though when we moved to the JavaScript, the platform API. So I'm not entirely sure that it still works, but that used to be the way that you would add plugins to your project.
Okay.
But if we would try to deprecate or get rid of the platform-centric workflow, I think continuing to maintain Plugman would mean we're not getting rid of the platform-centric API, because it's basically a tool just for that, and for, creating a template for a new plugin that's awfully outdated though. So
I haven't even looked at Plugman's code in like what, 2 years. So
Yeah, I don't think much has changed since then. I fixed some stuff that was obviously broken once I touched it, but there's probably more.
I think I did do a major release, and all I did last time was update the dependencies. But I didn't like I kind of like ran through whatever that was in the I think the README or something as like commands, but like to actually create an entire like project using it, I didn't try that. I just made sure the commands worked without crashing.
Yeah.
I think what makes sense if we're talking about the embedded workflow and how plugins would work there, and we know that the documentation for the embedded workflow is non-existent or out of date, going through like a demo project of adding it as a library, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and updating the documentation as you do that seems like a good way to figure out what the problems we're likely to encounter are.
I really feel like if we do this, it's like the thing that I've been trying to deprecate when I talk about platform-centric workflow is the use of checking out like Cordova iOS repo. Like, so right now the Electron repo, I've deleted all the binaries except for one, which Cordova lib calls onto to get the version of the platform, which is not necessary, but basically I've got rid of all the binaries, so you can't like just run create from the repo anymore with regards to Electron. And it never worked to begin with anyways. So it was like basically a brand new platform. So might as well not have it in there if it doesn't work to begin with. So when I talked about getting rid of, that's what I wanted to get rid of. And you can actually then treat it as a proper package. So that's like how Electron does not copy any of its Cordova tooling into the platforms folder anymore. It stays in the node modules. I was able to maintain that structure, like an actual proper node module, with a few exceptions, like a bridge. I had to keep a bridge at least. But if we get rid of platform-centric at that level, we can properly, manage platforms as how they are intended. And then if we're doing this platform-centric workflow in a sense of, I'm going to run the pods install or the Maven to install it into a native project, that's kind of separated from the CLI. It's no longer like attached to the CLI. So we could try to make a project, like you said. We can try to figure out what's broken, what's the issues, document it and fix that. But what we're fixing is not inside CLI, not inside any of the Cordova tooling or platforms. It's all basically kind of separated, except for if we need to change something inside the CocoaPods library that we build, that piece might change in the platforms, but none of the JavaScript tooling. That's what I was basically trying to separate, because I want the CLI side to be as stable and more efficient, faster, but not break because of trying to maintain platform-centric style formatting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when people talk about dropping the platform-centric workflow, it's mostly around not having those bin scripts in the platforms and not needing to maintain those.
Well, I might add that the plugin stuff, being able to install a plugin to a single platform, and more than that, being able to uninstall any plugin in any plugins in any given order from a single native project. That's something that's also basically only required by the platform-centric workflow, because if you would strictly treat your native projects or your platforms as build artifacts, then we could drop a lot of complexity regarding the plugin management, like installation, deinstallation. And there is a lot of complexity there in CLI. I mean, a lot of Cordova lib or I would say the biggest part of Cordova Lib is plugin management.
Yeah. I wonder how. So, I guess it's not clear to me. Like, oh, well, I don't know. So we're talking about there's both platform-centered workflow and embedding. These are two different. They're two different. They're kind of different things, but they're related. And one thing I'm wondering is, okay, so how does Capacitor is able to do both embedding and managing Cordova plugins?
They're probably doing the embedded and using Plugman. So they're using the embedded route most likely. They're not using probably the platform-centric like binary files from the platform repos.
Okay.
That's how I think, but I never really investigated deeply. But like I wouldn't see why they would check out, the platform repo and run the binaries to create a project. I think they have their own like dummy down project, and if they're going to use the Cordova plugins, they're just going to like use probably the embedded like the CocoaPods library,
Right.
and then run Plugman, probably.
The way it works, the plugins are installed from npm, and the capacitor CLI have some code to copy the files and create a CocoaPod library or a Android module where the plugin files are put. That's all done from the capacitor CLI. We don't use Plugman or anything, nor the embedded case. No.
How do you manage plugin uninstallation? Is that also managed by Capacitor CLI?
No, with npm you install or uninstall the plugin, and then you use date or sync command that removes everything and put the files back.
Okay, I meant like installing it into the native project, like because some of the plugins.
Yeah, it's a separate module that is a dependency on the user project. So the user only the dependent module.
It's not, so from what I'm hearing or what I'm understanding is the capacitor CLI manages the installation piece. They'll run the npm install. They know how to copy the files where it needs to be into the native project. But when the user wants to remove a plugin, they would just run the regular npm uninstall command and then run a capacitor sync command, which basically, what it sounds like, is almost rebuilding the project. So it's kind of like trashing the files and then like replacing it somehow so that the plugin is no longer in there. Is that right?
It removes everything and copy the system plugins back.
So yeah, it's like a rehash, rebase, rebuild.
Yeah, recopy.
But how does that like go together with the native project is not a build artifact style? Because like if the user manually changes stuff in the project and you rebuild it, you would have to, I don't know, store all these manual changes too somewhere. How does that work?
The plugins is a separate project that is for us is a CocoaPod library that is built on the sync command, and on Android is a Gradle module that is imported on the user project.
So something to understand about Capacitor is that instead of adding the plugins directly to the native project, it like creates a sub project for each plugin.
Yeah. No, all they are all in the same project because the dependencies like file plugin were hard to maintain, so we put every plugin in the same project. Only for the Cordova plugins. For capacitor plugins, they are separate, but for the Cordova plugins, they are the same module.
But that separation from like the app project and then the
Yeah.
plugins project means
Yeah,
that
they are a module for all the plugins, but separate from the user project.
you can selectively rebuild and recopy things without trashing code in the app level.
The same thing is possible within, you know, any individual project as well. Because I mean, I've built projects and I only cared about iOS. I was going to go there first. So I created a Cordova project. I added the plugins that I needed. I built once, and then from there, I just opened Xcode with the project and started working from there. And that workflow it is possible. You just have to be careful that you don't accidentally wipe everything out with the Cordova tooling. But if you commit stuff in that folder to your repo, you can actually see what Cordova is doing when you say add a plugin. And it's not likely that that's going to mess up your project, because really the Cordova tooling is just adding or removing things to the project, and whether or not you call them, that's still on you, right?
Yeah, if you know what you're doing and you know what stuff the Cordova tooling is going to touch, then you can make changes to the native projects and mostly avoid having Cordova overwrite those. I think we definitely don't encourage people to do that, because if you were to say uninstall and install a new version of Cordova iOS, you would lose those changes.
Yep.
There's a lot of times that we encourage people to essentially delete the platforms and plugins folders and recreate them for every build, just so you have consistent builds.
That's a really nice point actually about Cordova. Is I do really like with Cordova that you don't have to, like, all the artifacts that, like, plugins and platforms artifacts, not having to keep it all in Git. I do really like that, as long as it works.
And I think you can make it work most of the time, because with hooks you can basically do everything. I mean, just if you have to do really complicated manual things, I don't even know. I managed to do everything with hooks that was out of the ordinary until now. So as long as you're not using PhoneGap build or something else that is the same and does not support hooks, you're fine.
Yeah, you can do a surprising amount of stuff with hooks, including just like completely overwriting files in the native project with edited ones.
Yeah.
I've seen Cordova plugins that actually used hooks to rewrite a few lines in actually the Cordova tooling code. It's like, I think this was like when we were looking for the Xcode proj file versus the XC workshop. So some plugin wanted to support this, and it basically looked with regular expression or something, finds all Xcode proj or whatever, and then just mass replace with XC workshop. Yeah, eventually that plugin broke.
Surprise.
Yeah.
But yeah, the hooks. Yeah, hook scripts can basically allow you to touch any file that they probably shouldn't be modifying, because then it could literally break things for normal command, like things that they use normally. And if they uninstall, like a lot of times they may not even have a cleanup scripts for this type of change.
Yeah.
So if they uninstall the plugin, that change will stay in there, and then when they run a command, it's kind of still broken if the plugin was broken, or or still injecting something into their app that's part of that plugin that they uninstalled. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's also a reason why we officially support uninstalling plugins from native projects or platforms, but it's not we cannot promise that it will work because a plugin can do anything with hooks, and it's just right now it's just like a best effort thing, and we could simplify a lot if we just drop it all together and say uninstallation is building it from scratch without the uninstalled plugin.
Yeah, I remember making that type of recommendation before because there's like an issue. I think it still exists actually
Yeah.
in the munging process. So basically, we have to keep this like count of every time, like, so when we install a plugin and say it modifies the Android manifest using the config edit and config file, it will actually do an increment count of that particular change because another plugin may do the exact same change. So if you uninstall one plugin but not the other, you don't want to lose that modification to the Android manifest file. So that process is really hard to maintain. It's basically we're like making a three-way merging type, like we're trying to basically make get or something in our tooling. But I've always felt the easiest solution, and this was like my recommendation at one point, and I don't remember what people said, but basically my idea would be if you do a plugin remove, it's literally going to trash the platforms folder, like, and kind of rebuild your project because you have template of what the Cordova based project is. You have your tooling, so you can start re-adding all the plugins that are stored on the package JSON or the config.xml. So it's always easier to like rebuild, is what I thought. And then you don't have to manage like increment counts. You don't have to understand what changes plugins like did to retain it. But I don't remember what where the discussion went on that.
I think that's where the concern about like you need to make sure that it's clear to users that running this command will cause them to lose any modifications that they've made in the native project.
Yeah, which is like what we typically say don't do. But yeah, so yeah, yeah. that's the trick. But obviously, that's not gonna like even if we did do that, going back to the hooks, if they were modifying, with hook scripts, the Cordova, tooling files, those things aren't going to be recovered. Like once it's changed and they don't have like a revert, like an uninstall hook to revert that change, that's not going to happen until they like reinstall the platform.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why I kind of moved all of the Cordova tooling logic for Electron up into the node modules. Like, how many people want to go modify things in node modules? Like, I'm hoping they don't, but I think most people know not to check node modules into get, so it's going to be gone always. So that's kind of why I did that, and I was trying to prepare this for this release, but I kind of got a little delayed, so I kind of postponed it for maybe next release. I'm planning to move the platform template also to node modules. So when you build, it will always copy from node modules the platform template into the platforms folder, and then the users www on top of that. So there would be no more platform www. So that also restricts users from tampering with with a plugin hook script or something to modify a template file of the project and not revert it on an uninstall. So
I think
Yeah,
that's really awesome. Like the more stuff we can keep in node modules, both JavaScript and native sources, the more stuff, the better, because then you don't have to keep it all in Git. And I think both capacitor and React Native, I think, do use a lot of stuff from node modules.
so yeah, like I said, with Electron, I did do pretty much everything. The only thing that I could not move out was the version bin file, because lib called onto that to grab the version. But I wrote some logic to call onto the api.js file, which had to also stay, but that api.js file is just a router to the api.js file in now node modules, the real api.js file. So literally, I only have 2 files left. And if we can update, obviously, if we can update lib to try and call the API modules in node modules for a platform, then those can be removed. Same thing with the binary file. So I almost, in a sense, with Electron, I've almost completely emptied out that platform's Electron folder and treat that folder as just the build stage, like a staging folder, and the build output folder. That was my end goal, to try to like clean up. But obviously, since Electron was new, I was able to like kind of play around with this idea and actually progress on it. But to go and make these type of changes with like iOS and Android, which is like a platform that existed for so long, obviously we'd have to get everyone to review it and commit to this type of change. But
oh, for Android, we talked about last time, we talked about like supporting not Groovy, what's the other one?
Android app.
Kotlin.
Supporting Kotlin and Android X together. And if that would be a new platform, like a greenfield, I wonder if we could.
So if we go that route of building a brand new platform, I would technically base my platform off of the Electron, because Electron, like, as I said, got rid of platform centric for the most part. It's got everything into node modules. Obviously there's some things I'd have to copy over from the original, Android repo, like how it manages installing plugins, because there's some slight special logic, like how to read the manifest and how to put things in certain areas. So yeah, there's some things that I have to copy over, but like for the most part, the base of Electron could be like the future template for all future platforms, or what we would like to migrate to. Yeah.
Yeah, I would keep in mind also that there's a whole native tooling aspect to other platforms that's not there in Electron. Like the first thing that I do when I'm looking at an issue with a plugin or a platform is I create a new project and install the plugin and open it in Xcode and actually use tooling there, or at Android Studio, right? And I'm able to dig through, find what's the issue, make modifications until I feel like I've fixed the issue, then backport those changes into the actual platform or plugin, right? So there's a workflow there that's very dependent on having those output build pieces.
Yeah, so so like with Electron, I'm not moving the build output like outside of the platforms folder. So same thing with Android. Like if I was to like rebuild like a new platform or something, the platform's Android folder would still contain like your 2 pieces or whatever, your build output and your actual native project, where you can like open it with Android Studio. So that would remain.
Okay.
I wasn't planning to like really the only thing that would be gone would be like the base template would stay in node modules. The Cordova's JavaScript tooling, which is necessary for like the CLI, the lib, all that would stay in Node.js. But everything in the Android folder would be just the Java or Kotlin based project that you can open with Android Studio. And same thing with the output, the build output. And for like debugging, like you're saying, like how you backport, things that I do typically would be like what I've been doing recently with the push notification plugin. I actually install it with --link. So when I make changes, it actually modifies the changes where it needs to be into the plugin repo.
Unless it's a JavaScript change.
Yes. that yes.
Both NPM and Yarn support like a link where when you add a package or use a package, it's a link. And I think that, at least in theory, it should be possible that, okay, you're running on a project, you have your own project, you're running, you run and debug, run debug, edit, right? The typical cycle. And then every time you make changes, if you use links, with NPM and Yarn, it should, at least in theory, be able to make it back into a repository, a separate project, a separate project work area where you can then commit the changes. This is in theory.
Well, so it does work, but it only works with like the native code, not the JavaScript. Like if you make changes with the Java code, it will actually appear into your plugin that you linked. But the JavaScript does not, because we actually take the entire JavaScript code and inject it into the Cordova_plugins.js file. So that's like now a copy of the code. So when you're making changes, you're actually changing that file, not the actual plugin code.
Is that something to do in the future? I mean, it would be nice.
It won't work. This is native code, right? The link has to be in the native project, right? So when you install a plugin with --link, what it's doing is it's modifying the project file for Android Studio, saying the file, instead of the file being in the same folder as the rest of the project, it's saying that file is elsewhere.
Symbolic link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So npm link is not involved at that point. It's really a project specific thing. So there's exactly the same concept in the Xcode project as well, or workspace.
So yeah, that was kind of my idea with some of the way we can progress with the platforms itself, to try to kind of lock down our files a bit more, put them into the node modules to try to hope, I guess, that developers don't modify these files, to try to make it a little consistent, that builds consistently, like do what it should. Obviously, if you're using a CI, obviously you're not checking in your node modules. So if they were to modify, they have to do a hook, and that's something we can't really help with. But yeah, obviously I don't know what we decided to do with even the Kotlin and Xcode. That's not Xcode, Android X. That's something we'll have to figure out eventually one day. Yeah.
Do we want to wrap on this subject and move on to talking about using that funding? Is there any next steps we should discuss for working on this? I'd like to spend some time looking at the Electron code a little more, because I haven't been paying that much attention to it. So I'd like to catch up there.
Yeah, the Electron would be nice to get some extra eyes on. Like I said, I got that one thing left, the templates, to migrate that over, which was a little problematic for me. But but there's a lot of parts that need to change. And then I am now actually working on the fun part, getting plugins to work. So basically how to allow developers to create a plugin that will actually work inside their app. That's the fun part.
I'm kind of wondering, is there anything Capacitor is doing to solve that problem with native code on Electron?
I actually already have ideas that would work. Basically, if there's like there's multiple ways. The way we're telling some users right now is to enable Node integration that will allow them to use Node inside their basically in their web code, like the www directory. But that is not exactly that used to be acceptable. But now Electron is not wanting to do that. They want to actually have their have this node related type code like encapsulated through some sort of what do they call it? It's like some sort of security protocol or something. So that would remain false, but they would create this thing that would be preloaded, which you can then inject into the window like into the window object, so they can have access. So it's kind of like a bridge to the native layer almost that Electron seems to have. And they obviously, if there's npm packages with native binaries, there's like a few. I'm trying to remember what was one of them. Someone recently asked about it, but basically they would use like GPY or something to build it for that targeted Electron version. So you actually have a native binary, and then you use obviously your node code to call and make like to do what you want with it. So I kind of have an idea. I just have to like build it right now. So like I'm right now in the trial and error phase of that building process.
We got almost an hour out of that. Wow.
Oh.
Surprise,
So,
surprise.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, Chris, do you wanna introduce the funding topic and maybe give a little background for anyone watching on YouTube who is not aware of the donation?
Sure. I hope I don't. I'm going to try not to butcher the whole thing. So my understanding and recollection from a bunch of just emails, there's been a lot of stuff both on private mail, on the private list, and then I did bring some stuff public, and then I actually went quiet because there was some, I think there was a little bit of a, I think there was a bit of like, I would say it's, there's a bit of indecision going on for, because, and see if I can explain this. So my understanding is that someone from the board, Daniel Ruggieri, approached us, and it sounds like, I think there's an anonymous donor that gave us, they did donate, I think it's been, like maybe $5,000 or $6,000 to be earmarked to help out with Apache Cordova. And $5,000 to $6,000 to help a project like ours it is really, it's really awesome. And I would like to say, if the donor, if anyone from the donor, whether it's a person or organization, if the donor is watching, I want to thank you very much for your contribution. It is much appreciated. The problem that I've been trying to deal with is that, the donations have to go according to, because we're an Apache project, the donations have to all go through the proper procedures and channels. and I actually was starting to butcher this whole procedure myself. So anyone watching doesn't understand. I don't blame you, because I also got it wrong. So what happens is, I think it's every Apache project page, there's a link that says, okay, you want to donate, you hit the link, and then when you follow the, there is a procedure on how do you donate, and it's also documented what we may use the funds for. So it is not, okay, so basically it is not allowed, we cannot use donated funds to pay for development. And I think we cannot use donated funds to pay for testing. And those two seem to be the most time intensive, time and labor intensive. And because, yeah, it would be really nice to, like the save $5,000. I mean, there are plenty of developers around the world who should be able to do a lot for $5,000. You could sponsor, should be able to sponsor multiple months of help just to get through all our issues. But because development is, because helping, so using for development is not allowed. Using for testing is not allowed. And I think they're, they explain on the, I think they explain on the website. I don't really understand it, but they have, they have their own reasons. So we've identified documentation, and I think the document. So according to, and we're in contact with, someone from the Apache board, Daniel Ruggieri, and it does make the most sense to basically earmark this donation for documentation. And I think our theory is that it should really be possible to make a nice impact, because the documentation is, I keep finding, this is not clear. This is hard to understand. Sometimes find, things are out of sync. So I feel like the, like it should be possible to do an overhaul of our documentation, and I think there are experts who should be able to do what we need for $5,000 basically. But but then the part that I've kind of got lost is this. So the board, so the board, for some reason, they are not very happy with our decision to earmark this donation for documentation. And unfortunately, I don't understand why. I did ask a couple times by email. So that's kind of a bit of an unknown. I did also go through, write some like email and issues. Okay, this is what I think we should do. This is how I think we should do it. I don't know if I did the right way or not. I have a feeling that, it should probably, that it probably should have been done in a different way. How do we make sure that spending this budget to update the documentation would give us the impact results that we're looking for, and we should be able to get out of this. But anyway, this is the part that I don't really understand, is because I guess the Apache board is for some reason not happy with our decision to earmark the donation for documentation. We've come back to discuss, okay, what are some other options? And I think a major option that has come up is, buying test devices. So it does make sense to buy test devices, because the more, so there, the more test devices you have for a framework like Apache Cordova, the better. But having the test devices has another major problem, because we are, the Apache Cordova members, we are distributed across multiple countries around the world. I think the most of us, between the United States, Canada, and Germany, we got quite a few people in these three countries. So it might not be as bad as I originally thought. But okay, we have one person in Japan now. I've seen Node.js, and yeah, so Node.js, like I recall that there was one, Node.js goes from all the way from the United States all the way around to Australia. And I recall that there was one person, Rod Vag, I think, is in Australia, and he actually had to have some servers for Node.js running in his basement all the way, all the way in Australia, for example. And so I think it's not as bad for us as it would be for someone in, Node.js for someone in Australia, but it's still good, it'd still be that, having devices stored and having to be stored somewhere among 3 or 4 countries is a little, is logistics that would be nice. It's another kind of a headache that, would be nice if not to deal with. So now I think at this point, this is where we're at. And so I guess I did have a question. I don't know if Jesse is in contact with the board of Apache, maybe did send by email. If we can find out, okay, what kind of objections did the board have to earmarking the donation to improve our documentation? And is there anything that we could do to address these objections?
I can elaborate a bit on some of that as well. So because Apache is an organization of developers, and all developers are volunteers, people aren't paid for their development work. It's all done on a volunteer basis. That's why no one can come in and say, I want to donate to this project, but I want you guys to build this because my company would need it. Right, so that's sort of why there's the restriction on using a donation to pay for development work. And I think in this case, our documentation is actually a project within our universe, right? It's not something where you can just go and completely just modify some text. Right, there's a whole build system behind it that would need to be overhauled. There's a lot of development pieces involved with that as well, and I think that's probably part of the pushback. But I think if we were to say, instead of we want a documentation overhaul, we could say we want a technical writer to write some guides. Or we said we want someone to do some deep dive YouTube videos on explaining different parts of Apache Cordova and how to develop apps using Apache Cordova. That we could probably work that through. Also on the subject of the devices, it's a little tricky because there are international restrictions on transporting devices, and they would need to be purchased in each of the locales, right, in each country. So I'm not sure how that would work. The things that are easy to spend donations on are if we need infrastructure, we need specific servers to run CI. Those sorts of things are a lot easier. We could also look at, are there any services that we need? Was it you, Tim, who mentioned not being able to test the actual App Store submission process because you don't have an Apple iTunes Connect account?
Yeah, that's correct.
So that might be something that we could also do. We could have an Apache Cordova membership in Xcode Connect that would allow us to push things to the App Store and verify that things don't get blocked. to see the review process. That might be another thing, but that's realistically, that's $100 a year per developer that needs to use it. So it's not going to make a big dent in that $5,000 that I really think we'd like to spend as soon as possible.
Yeah,
Because-
like, even talking about the license thing, like I don't even know if you need one per developer, because you can actually have like an organization license, I think, and it would be like the Cordova, and then now what is it, $100 for all of Cordova? So yeah, there's that. There's the license maybe or whatever if you need for Play Store, which I don't think you do, like for testing. I don't know, but then there's also like you're saying, the CI stuff. Obviously, like we've migrated everything to GitHub, or we're trying to migrate everything to GitHub Actions because it's faster and it's somewhat per repo, but there is still some sort of shared resources at the organization level from what I've been hearing when I was speaking directly to the Apache infrastructure. And but you can actually purchase, like you're saying, self-hosted runners, and these self-hosted runners you actually would set up at a per repo level. So like technically they could probably get some self-hosted runners and point it to our repo specifically to speed up our CI, to give us more resources, and that would not then be shared to, say, the other Apache projects. So if CI started to get slow, that's some stuff where it could go into, is what I was thinking about. But right now, CI seems to be pretty fast.
Yeah, and a lot of services that we use are actually donating their service because we are an open source project as well.
That's
So-
that's the thing about CI and build resources, and even Apple Xcode is not a lot of, it's maybe the most expensive thing, but that's not a heck of a lot of money either. Is that, if you talk about like for CI, having there's like CI and cloud stuff has just only gotten cheaper over the years. And yes, an open source project, especially with the visibility like Apache Cordova, companies will just, half the time they'll just give it away. So I mean, we can spend money there, but it's not going to make, that's what I don't like, is it's not going to make a huge amount of, I don't see a huge amount of impact helping out with CI. It would, I mean, like $5,000 to keep us, to give us good CI would last, could last us like 10 or 20 years. So that's the good part. But, we may not even be relevant in 10 or 20 years.
Well, let's say we kept Sauce Labs, for example. That's
What
a CI.
What kind of money are we talking for Sauce Labs? Because that's a really, that could be.
So if you want to use real device cloud testing, you're looking at $399 a month, and you're billed annually. So if you were to say I want to be billed monthly, it's probably even more than that.
So that might, I mean,
Checking right now, $50.
But that's the thing. That's if we were to like stick with Sauce Labs is the thing. Like we've been having connectivity issues. We got like obviously the JWT issue. If we were to just completely drop Sauce Labs and just like rely on just launching the emulators, we can get away with GitHub CI. So yeah, but if we were to want to stick with Sauce Labs and say we want to actually test on real devices that are connected to the cloud, so you can actually be testing on a physical device, yeah, you're looking at like maybe $399 a month, and you got to pay it over like for the full year. So 399 times 12, right? Or if you want to try to do it monthly, then you're looking at close to $500.
couldn't we get it like? Couldn't we get them cheap? Couldn't we get them cheaper, like for open source? Couldn't we get them down?
We are using their open source license, and that only gives you virtual, I think, like just emulators and 3 concurrent jobs at a time. So that's why if you like put like 4 or 5, or 5, So if you were like to submit, you know, PRs to like, you know, 6 plugins, you know, you're now going to be waiting because you're launching maybe like how many tests do we run? 3 for each OS, maybe that's 6, maybe more. So basically, you got to wait for that one PR to finish before the other PRs of the other 5 plugins to kick off. And if other people are committing PRs, then now you're waiting there. So it's basically Sauce Labs is really slow based off the limitations that you have with regards to open source.
Well, I'm thinking that would be this. If we can get a deal for, you know, if there's any way we can get a deal for the Sauce Labs, for say, for, you know, that's something affordable, you know, like if we can get like, you know, if we can get something for the next like 3 to 5 years from Sauce Labs, something better, that'd be awesome.
And then there's also now this one is impossible based off their pricing model, but Slack, we're free and we don't retain any history. Like, well, it's still there, but they don't show it. So if like a lot of people know they've said something in Slack, so they're trying to search for something, but you're like looking at paying per user, and we have too many users. That, yeah, even the 5,000 won't cover that. Not even a fraction. No.
No, that's gone first month.
Probably when you cover first month is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, Slack charges per user, which we have too many users to make that make sense.
Like, I think there's Spectrum chat, for example. I think
there's lots of alternatives. It's just how do you move 8,000 people from one network to another?
Don't you mean just an announcement?
Yeah. I mean, like the history thing I've worked around. I've been logging nightly. I have an issue with not getting the full threaded conversations that I'm trying to work out before I actually push it to the Cordova repo. But I am doing a nightly collection of every message in a public channel in the last 24 hours. So they are there, and it's very close. It's just getting the threaded conversations in there as well.
Yeah, so we're finding solutions around it, and it works.
Yep.
But the downside is most of the users don't know this repo that it's being published to. They don't know how to like find it, search it. So
no one knows right now.
Yeah. Well, eventually, if it's there, they may not even still know. And they'll like ask questions all the time, and then we'll point them to it. But the other thing is since it's on GitHub search is not actually that good. Like sometimes I know there's something in our code somewhere, and I know I've seen it, and I can't find it with GitHub search. I have to like literally clone that repo and then search. So if people were to actually go to GitHub and try to search for what they want, which they know they've talked about or something, they're not going to find it probably.
Yep.
So
like if I search code on GitHub, I will often just use Google, say in Google GitHub project name, whatever, and
I just clone it. I just clone it on my computer and.
I am generating Markdown, so we could use something like Netlify to make a static website of all of it, if we wanted to go that route. But we're off topic from talking about using a donation.
Yeah, I think for donation wise, like as far as what is not against Apache, so far, would be like adding test runners to speed up testing, but it's not slow right now. Maybe requesting to get, the real, so we want, we're talking about devices, but it's difficult. Like you're saying, you got to purchase devices in each country or something. And if that is impossible, then the only other option would be to actually pay for real device testing with some service like Sauce Labs. And there's others, yep. But that most of the services are expensive versus like if you purchase a device, it's one-time purchase.
Yeah, I can explore the device question with Apache, because I think that would give us the most bang for our buck. And I mean, Android, it's hard to keep up with all the different devices. iOS, they're not cheap as well. I mean, we could get an iPhone, an iPad, and 2 Android devices, and that would probably spend all the money for one person, right? To be able to test in a variety of devices.
And also developer license, maybe. I don't know. I'm using my own developer license, but for my own.
Yeah, same.
But, yeah.
But
I mean, Apache
we can
has an account.
purchase an organization license because they ask for a number, a dance number, that if you are not an organization, you can give one. And the organization is Apache, and they already have one license, so we can have one.
We're talking about organization license. Right?
When you register for organization, they ask for a number that is called the DUNS.
Oh, you're talking about not the TIN number. Okay.
No, it's something else. But yeah, you need it for an organization. They want to check that you're actually a company.
Yeah.
I mean, Apache has a special agreement with Apple, and there's an existing Apache account, so maybe we can just join this account too. But it seems the handling of the certificates and identifiers is a bit of a hassle, because you need to open a ticket each time you need a new certificate.
Yeah, I wonder how many people are in that organization.
Like 10 in whole Apache.
Yeah?
There's
Like,
the file is checked into SVN, so you can take a look, and it's pretty empty there.
You didn't add yourself?
No, not yet. I need to read like 10 pages of legal terms beforehand.
Okay.
And
yeah, I mean that might be one small avenue that we could spend some on, because it would be good to be able to see if the App Store is going to accept a submission, and have them be able to run the static analyzer across our code. So we're almost at an hour and a half. Do we want to discuss the next meeting? Maybe figure out when we can do it again, or should we do that on the list?
I think regular meetings are more likely to have, like consistent meetings are more likely to have consistent participants.
Yep.
The one issue is the time zones, which is really, really challenging, because we're going, like all the way from the West Coast to America to Japan, almost all the way around the world is, it's unfortunately people on the West Coast of America have to start really early. I don't know if that's a problem for people, and people in people in Asia, it's also not that handy.
I think the issue is just my time, which is okay. I can show up at any time. I can burn the other end of my candle.
Okay.
Or we could spend the donation on relocating Brian to the US.
was actually I made a joke earlier. Like I sent a message to someone saying like we can like use the donation to send everyone like energy drinks to work longer hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could use that to stay awake for the meetings. But yeah, like I think really everybody's time zone, I think almost everyone else's time zone actually fits nicely. It's like everybody's either starting their day or not really late at night, but like getting close, like midday to like near end. But like obviously mine is the
Yeah,
odd hour.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really think like y'all can work around your time and I'll just show up if I can or not. And most of the time it will be okay.
And I think it does make sense. I think more and more people are, as more and more people have to meet online, then like people on the West Coast have to get up early anyway to get to the other meetings. And
Yeah.
people in, like people in Europe and the East have to, have to deal with Western time zones anyway for other, for other meetings. So maybe it, may just come out in the wash.
So should we aim for 2 weeks from now in the same time slot? Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
I will try to keep it at an hour, and we'll try to get a more rigid agenda. Sound good?
Yep, that's good with me.
Awesome. Thank you all for your time. Thanks for staying up so early, Brian.
No problem.
Okay. Cheers. Have a good one.